In the past and even today, the act of negotiating had negative connotations. Negotiation was associated with haggling, arguing, and maybe backroom deal making. These days, we better understand that negotiation is a serious social activity for solving problems, small and large. And of course, once we view negotiation as a tool for solving problems, we become much more curious about how to do it effectively. In general, issues, that is the things that we need to discuss and resolve, can be divided between distributive or zero-sum issues and integrative or positive-sum issues. A distributive or zero-sum issue is a matter for which one party's gain is the other party's loss. And discussing distributive issues will tend to be competitive and contentious. An integrative or positive sum issue gives the possibility that both parties can be made better off, that a mutually beneficial agreement can be found. Now, the traditional approach to negotiation is called either positional bargaining or distributive negotiation. And this approach views negotiation as essentially a process of manipulation, focused on getting the best possible deal from the other side. And this traditional approach focuses on distributive issues, and bargaining involves taking and justifying concrete positions and then resisting giving concessions. The theory behind distributive negotiation focuses on how to best choose your initial position and how to make effective concessions, on concession-making strategies, as well as whether or not we should use strategic misrepresentation. That is, whether to use hardball tactics that are often supported by cognitive biases, mistakes that people tend to make when presented with information in a certain way. Distributive negotiation is the model that most people have in mind when they think about negotiation. It is also a model that most people dislike. It is the model of the market where people haggle in order to obtain the best possible deal without any regard to its effect on relationships. It's actually surprising that the distributive approach is the one that comes to mind when thinking about negotiation, since most of us negotiate very differently every day with our friends and family. Sometimes distributed negotiation does in fact produce efficient outcomes. For example, trading on the stock market is an example of where positional bargaining is both effective and useful. In other cases, distributed negotiation can produce disasters. Of course, as economists, positional bargaining is consistent with an assumption that people are always trying to maximize their monetary rewards or their utility. There is considerable evidence that most people, most of the time, are actually more interested in satisficing, not maximizing. That is, they're more interested in not being taken advantage of, or at least not doing worse than anybody else. And that implies that there are very important emotional aspects to any negotiation. It is clear that an emphasis on positions, making concessions, and maximizations tend to promote stubbornness, anger, frustration, and distrust. And it actually discourages creative cooperation between people. And, importantly, it often ruins relationships. The competing approach, which is called, again, integrative negotiation, this approach argues that rather than sacrificing the relationship to the pursuit of substantive gains, the parties should explicitly recognize their goal as dealing with both the relationship and the substance. Instead of taking positions and using threats and justifications when making concessions, the parties should talk, side by side, about their interests, principles, options, and objective criteria. The idea behind integrative negotiation is that by talking about interests and objective criteria, rather than positions and maximization, will encourage better communication, greater understanding, more creativity, and it will avoid this negative impact on relationship or the need for face-saving tactics. Although integrated negotiation is usually considered to be superior to the distributive approach, it does have several potential problems. For example, it is not clear how to handle issues of negotiation power. It is also unclear how one can both separate the people from the problem without overlooking the vital link between relationship and the negotiation process. Another potential issue is the fact that an integrative approach requires, in general, much more effort. And it is therefore a question whether that extra effort is worth it. Anyway, at this point, it is important for you, to be aware of these different negotiation strategies and start to think about which one will work better in any given circumstance.